Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Screen Society podcast. And we are another episode into the Pitt Season 2, Episode 7, titled 1 p.m., which aired on Thursday, February 19th, 2026. It was 53 minutes long. The IMDb synopsis is: while Dana tends to a sexual assault victim, Abbott helps an officer injured in the field, and Moan attempts to keep her uninsured patient in the ER. On IMDb, it's got an 8.8 with 1,000 reviews plus. Director Yuda Britzowitz, writers Kirsten Pierre Gaifman, Scott Gemmel, and Valerie Chu, starring Noah Wiley, Patrick Ball, and Catherine Lanassa. So let's dive into it. We had quite an emotionally heavy and charged episode, much like we normally do with the Pitt. But right away, it picks up from where we left off, and it is the whole, well, not the whole ER department, but most of the department that were caregivers for Louie, our frequent flyer who passed away last episode. They are still gathered around there. It's still showing Langdon dropping that photo that he had found on Louie back into kind of like his blanket right up around his chest area, and basically laying to rest in a way Louie in the pit. And the team starts to leave the room. Robby has a moment with Al Hashimi. Al Hashimi seems to try to comfort Robby in a way, but it is a quick turnaround from dealing with a patient that they've all grown to really care for. And it shows the realistic nature of an ED where these people know these patients and they've cared for them for so long, especially your frequent flyers. And there is a tremendous sadness, but that is quickly put on the back burner because they now have to go from a tremendous moment of grief and sadness to taking care of their other patients. And right away, as they leave the room, Dr. Robby, as he is leaving the room, says to the rest of the team, all right, guys, where are we? Meaning, what is happening in the ER that we need to take care of? What are your patients looking like? Who needs assistance? And then he goes over to talk to Dana, and Dana is the one filling him in on what the ER looks like and what the board looks like. So they're right back to it. They didn't have a moment to really take in what had happened. I mean, they had a moment, but they didn't really have much longer than that to really take in what happened with Louie and grieve too much, as they are right back into their roles. And Dana informs Robby that baby Jane Doe is still waiting on peds. And then she starts her rundown of what's going on with all of the patients. And they are showing that it is still very busy in the pit. And so we're going to talk about certain patients, and we're going to go character by character. That's just an easier way to do it because the show jumps around so much. But we get we get news that there is a patient coming in that has been victim of sexual assault, and that they're going to need some assistance in taking care of her. And this shows a very dark side of what the healthcare system is, and the informal, informal but very formal process that they have to go through when caring for a patient that has been sexually assaulted, that's been raped. And I mean, it made me emotional watching this because, and I'm not somebody that fortunately has never been a victim of sexual assault, but knowing people that have been, or people working in a hospital, I've heard stories of them having to deal with patients that were care for patients that were victims of sexual assault. And I didn't realize how awful the process is. I knew obviously the person was going to be traumatized by what they had gone through, but I didn't know, and this show is very accurate in the way they depict what actually happens, but you pretty much can't take a break because they have to collect evidence. Because unlike most things in the ER, you are now an investigation. You are now evidence for a crime scene. And that sounds awful, but that is, and Dana does such a great job of caring for this patient that has been a victim of sexual assault. And the way that she talks her through this whole ordeal. Ilana Miller, I think, is the patient's name, but she is so sensitive to what this patient might be going through, and I think it sets it up beautifully because of the physical assault that happens on Dana last year in the show when she gets punched by the patient when he knocks her out. To kind of show that parallel with now having to also care for a patient that has been assaulted and obviously against her will, just like Dana. This is obviously a whole another version of assault, and but Dana can still relate and empathize with this patient. And I want to say she keeps calling herself, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think she kept calling herself a saint or something like that. I don't know if it was like some kind of religious thing or like, I don't know if there's like somebody that I don't know if that was the word. I'm trying to find it in the what do they call it? The subtitles of the episode. I'm trying to go through and listen to what they're calling her because I do think that there are people on staff that are uh, the ones that have to deal with the sexual assault. And I don't know if it's always the charge nurse. So if you're out there and you're listening and you're a medical professional, or you are a nurse, maybe this is a thing. Oh, she's saying a sane, SAN. Okay, I thought she was saying a saint, and I was really confused. She's calling herself a sane, and I think it's somebody that is dealing with sexual assault nurse something. I don't know what it actually, but they're very valuable. It's what they're trained in. And Al Hashimi is the one that's really talking with Dana about it, and they have Emma shadowing Dana. So they're trying to explain this. I'm going to look it up because I wasn't familiar with this term, sane. I thought she was kind of, again, like I said, I thought she was calling herself a saint, and I was like, what? So a sane is a sexual assault nurse examiner. Okay, that makes sense. So there are people that are trained because, and again, this is the case with a lot of different fields with nursing, is they're trained, they're cross-trained in different departments and different specialties where they are pulled for um, different reasons, obviously, but mostly dealing with different things that other nurses maybe not be trained in. And so I guess there are, I didn't know this, but there are sane nurses that are dealing specifically with sexual assault victims because it is a lengthy process. And I mean, I don't want to compare it to this, but like this is what came to mind for me of how difficult this looked. So when you do COVID testing or strep testing at home or anything like that, and I'm sure we've all done COVID tests at this point, it is difficult. Like it is difficult to get an accurate feel to what you're doing. I think sometimes I've taken them and maybe not gotten the most accurate information, or there are times where I'm like, did I get that right? Do I actually have COVID? Like, because you have to like swab your nose and you got to put in this liquid and then you got to dab it on this thing. And like, yeah, it's not like rocket science, but it is a process. And like, you got to get it all right in the right steps. And like, there's a certain amount of time. It reminded me of that, which is awful, but like, but it reminded me of like, they're poking and prodding this poor girl after she's been assaulted and she's clearly uncomfortable. But like they're sticking like different swabs into like this box to keep it like in contained evidence box. And like it's a sexual assault kit, like it comes in this box. And once they open it, Dana explains this, once you open this box, you cannot break at all. Like you cannot take a break. You have to keep going because you have to get the evidence. Because I think at certain points, some of the evidence that you could get or collect isn't really valid, or it becomes invalid because you can't extract the DNA from different things. And whether that's semen or spit or sweat, like obviously that stuff, I think uh, it dries up or evaporates or whatever it might be, goes into the skin. Like you cannot collect good evidence off of it. So, like I said, this is awful. And I guess I don't ever think or really think about this stuff. And I don't think a lot of people do until this show, really presents and depicts. This is the most in-depth depiction of what these people go through when they are victims of rape or sexual assault. And like just the traumatic experience you had alone before even coming into the ER is awful. And Dana is one of our most empathetic nurses. I am assuming that not, and there's probably a lot of them that are very good at this, but like I'm assuming there are some nurses that are just not pleasant to deal with, and they're the ones that are the same on the staff. Which, I mean, could you imagine this and then going in and then you're met with somebody that just is miserable in what they're doing and not liking their job and just like treating you like an object? I mean, it did. It made me really, really reflect and think this episode because of how awful this was. I mean, it was just, and can I just say, like, they do this all the time in this show where they cut music or they cut sound and it's just so raw that you get a real visceral reaction to what's actually happening in the episode. So in this case, what really struck me, obviously the process of it, but it was very quiet. And they talked about this with Al Hashimi. It was like, we want to always make sure that when they are in triage, that they are in the most private of areas because it can really ease some of the tension that is going on during these exams because of what they've been through, and they're not on display. And as you've seen in the besides like the curtains on the door and besides like the doors that shut, like there's glass on the, like you can see into other patients' beds. And this is very similar still in the ER. In most hospitals, like they do have the curtain, but it's not complete privacy. You can hear what's going on. You can see somewhat of what's going on through like the gaps in the curtains. And so they try to put more private matters in different rooms and areas of that ER that are not as visible. And they do this and they do a good job of it. But again, she's behind a curtain and then there's a door that's closed. But like somebody really was looking in, they could probably still see somewhat of what's going on in there. And but they try to give her as much privacy as possible. But just the fact that like everything is so quiet in this room when they're doing this test is such good directing on this episode. And it allows you to really, in a place that is much more storm like, and there's a lot of sounds and a lot of stimulation. There's no real stimulation in this besides Dana unwrapping the different swabs and talking to the patient and interacting with this person and that person interacting with her. And I think they do. Dana is so, I would say it's like stone faced, but like very serious. Even though she's being very empathetic and caring, she's still doing a job. I think it's perfect that Emma's in that room too, because it was showing that she was emotional. This was her first ever interaction with somebody that was sexually assaulted, especially as a nurse. Like that's got to be a very uncomfortable thing to have to learn, but they have to learn it. And Dana asks her multiple times if she wants to leave, she can leave. She goes, if this ever gets too uncomfortable for you, you may leave, because it's not a very comfortable thing. And I think, unfortunately, women do very much empathize with one another in these situations because women are, and I'm not saying that men are not sexually assaulted, but women, I think, are a much higher rate, obviously, of sexual assault. And I think that they have a very empathetic feeling towards people that have had to have gone through this stuff and experiences because they know what stops it from being them the next time, and unfortunately, as a breed of male, like I feel that, yeah, like I've seen the way that people interact around females and women, and that it is something as a male, as a privileged male, that I don't have to feel that, where I feel like I'm in danger of that. But it's always in the back of their minds of this could happen. Like, this could happen, and there might not be anything I can do to stop it. Which, my God, that has to be a horrible feeling. And we're going to get to, and even sickest part about this whole situation, which again can happen to anyone, but it was so well done. Catherine is so great in this role. Dana is like, I want to say she's like the core, which most charge nurses are, like the core of that hospital department. Like they are the leader. Um, and Dana is so good in this show. I just love every episode she's in. She is so good. I'm so glad that Noah Wiley has found Catherine Lanassa, who really was just not working at all and was just trying to make ends meet and get by in life. And she, had pretty much given up on acting, and uh, now has been cast and is one of the most powerful, influential people in this whole show, and maybe any of the shows on right now, because she is so good. So this sexual assault victim, we're getting to the end, but they basically go through this process, and they're having to get vaginal samples. They're having to get fluid off of her wrist, which I think people assumed was either spit or semen. Um, she's got some bruising, but not a whole lot. She's not really beaten as bad, not anything that we've seen. But then it gets to a moment where it just becomes too much for her, and she says that it's too much for her. But it's after it comes off the heels of her saying that, and you do hear this quite a bit, and this is something that I think, unless you are a victim of it and you understand this situation that this person was in, you just don't get what she's going through in this moment and why she says this. But it was a friend of hers. He got drunk and forced himself on her, and she goes, he just didn't understand what he was doing. And I think it definitely is, I think, a somewhat of a coping mechanism. I think some of it is like, you don't want your friend to get in trouble, and there is a lot of genuine belief, like, that these people are like, I never believed that this guy would hurt me. Like, we were really good friends, and like, he's a sweet guy. It's just he went too far this time. But on the flip side, that is oftentimes what you hear with people who are repeat offenders, or these are people that have assaulted other women and they've not come forward because they're afraid. And a lot of times, people, you hear this of people not coming forward because someone who has sexually assaulted them or raped them were family members or a loved one that they don't want to see get hurt. And because they feel like they can internalize this and get past it just as they would normal wounds or anything like that, or normal trauma, like, they're like, I can deal with this. I can get through this. I'm strong enough. Where you shouldn't have to feel that. Um, and I know it's a very difficult subject to approach as someone, especially who's not ever been a victim of this. But I do feel like they do such a nice job in this show of showing like what real emotions come with this. And uh, we're going to get more of her story as we move forward into the next couple of episodes, because we don't get the end of this. But we do have a counselor come in. I think she's part of like a women's group that comes in, and every hospital has this. So they work usually it's usually through a church. I think this is through a church in this instance too. But sometimes it's like a community center or a women's health center. And what they do is they'll partner with hospitals, and they'll have women's clothing, because when you are sexually assaulted, and I, again, didn't think of this, but when you're sexually assaulted or raped, you do have to turn over your clothing. And it was fascinating to watch this because you just don't know this process. And it was, I mean, it was, and like I said, it was so powerful, and I was actually shocked it didn't have like a. Usually, it'll like preface the episode by saying those who have been a victim or have been around sexual assault. This might be a really intense episode for you. They didn't have like that pre warning, which I was. I wonder if it's on there. Like I'm watching it on the iPad right now, and it wasn't on there yet. Like because usually, like if they'll have, especially like mental health or suicide, they'll have like a suicide or mental health prevention. I know sometimes with these kind of things, they'll have like a sexual assault hotline or something like that. If you've been raped, you can call this number or see this website, go to this website. But they didn't have that on here, which I thought was interesting. But back to what I was saying, they have a woman come in from the church that brings clothing because at the very beginning, when they're starting this exam, Dana is like, tells Ileana, the patient, can you strip down, make sure everything, so you're standing on these like bed pad things, like paper, and like you have to undress and carefully place it on this paper so that we can collect the paper and wrap every item and put it in a bag because it's all evidence. So like we don't want to lose if there was DNA on like the shoes or your socks or your underwear or whatever it might be. We don't want to lose the evidence. So you have to undress on this, like these paper mat things. And then they take it with their gloves and they put them in the bag. And that way it's not contaminated by other things in that room. And I mean, just how much you have to go through and worry about that are when you just probably want to curl up and just sob and just be alone. It is such an invasive, because it has to be. It is so invasive and um, traumatic that you can see it in this patient's eyes. But I mean, that was a long 20-minute segment. I just talked about that, but it was just such a powerful moment in this episode that I really felt we had to start this episode with because of how much we don't know, how little we really know as people and what people go through and have to go through. And it just, what a valuable lesson for somebody that's old enough to watch this, that this can be a lesson to them um, of what people go through. And I'm not saying that it would change people's minds that consider sexual assault fine or whatever it might be, or people are forcing themselves on people, that this would change them. But I do think it does raise an awareness of like what these people go through. I think I have much more empathy. I'm not saying that I wasn't empathetic to that, but I have much more of an understanding of like, gosh, this is even more awful than I thought it was, which was something, and it's something that this show continues to do. We'll then bounce to another really heavy subject of mental health, and it's another one that was really tackled in this one. So not only are we talking about the mental health and the fallout and the trauma that this poor patient Ileana is going to have to go through because of sexual assault, and now she has friends, and she's like, I don't want my relationships with my other friends to be destroyed because she's saying that I let this guy come on to me, but it's not her fault. She shouldn't have to, even though she's victim to this, she should not have to feel like she is the victim. She is not the, like, it is, or sorry, that she is not the victim. Like, she is a victim of sexual assault. She should not have to feel that she is the one that should be in trouble for this guy coming on to her, is what I meant. Not that she's not the victim. She is the victim. But she should not have to feel like she has to hide it from her friends because this guy decided to assault her. And I think that's the way she feels, is that I have to hide this from my friends because they're going to get mad at me because it's going to hurt their relationship with him, and he's a nice guy, which should never, nobody should ever have to feel that. But unfortunately, it is the case in some of these situations. But then we jump over to a mental health case, or multiple mental health cases. So you've got our patient Roxie, who was dealing with pain and leaving the hospital, and her husband's trying to get her to leave the hospital. And you see Dr. Robby jumping into these cases a lot this episode. He's jumping into each of these. I think the only one he really doesn't have a whole lot of jump in with, which makes sense because he's a male doctor. But Al-Hashimi is the one that is also dealing with the trauma of what's going on with Ileana and the sexual assault. Like, she's not in the room, but she is the attending over it. That tells Dana to go and do the exam. So Robby is dealing with all sorts of different things. This is one that he's jumped into because he sees the father, or not the father, the husband getting upset because the death doula and the husband want to take the wife home, and the wife's just like, I've. So now I'm figuring out what it is. So this wife looks like she doesn't want to be a burden to this family anymore. She's like, I'm pretty much just death looming over you. I'm sadness, I'm depression because of my illness. And I know I'm terminal. I know I'm going to die. And just the pain and suffering I'm causing not only my husband, but my children, and not allowing them to be able to move on and start the grieving process of moving on is killing her. Not only is the disease killing her, but that's killing her emotionally as well. And she just doesn't want to do it anymore. She wants to stay in the hospital to try to separate from the family, which is such a horrible thing to have to try to probably mentally grasp, but something that I think is a very selfless decision, and one that she has thought about quite a bit, and she suffered for years. And you see it in her kids, and it's really awful because the kids actually come in this episode, the two boys. One of the boys is sitting on the chair over on the side of the bed, and then one's sitting in the bed with her, and they're talking about death and like pain, and she's talking about that, and one of the boys gets really upset because they keep referring to death and like the terminal illness that is going on, and he's like, stop talking about death. So you can see like how much of an emotional toll this is taking on the kids, because they know that their mom is very sick, and that she's not likely to live much longer. So I think these kids are trying to cope with that. As I think they're like 9 and 10, like they're very young. So they're trying to deal with that. The father is trying to deal with them, but also as a husband trying to care for one that he's loved for so long. And so it's just a horrible thing. And Robby asks like, what's going on? And McKay's like, well, he doesn't really want to leave her, and she doesn't really want to be here. And Robby this whole time has been trying to move people out because the West Bridge is closed because of code black. So he's trying to find patients to get out, but he's like, well, I can't move this lady out now that he's in the situation with them. And the husband's very upset about her staying. He's like, well, we can move her upstairs. Maybe there's somewhere we can move her. Like we just need, which is awful. You have to think, like, just imagine that. Like you have to think about that as an attending of like the C-suite and the hospital is pressuring you to discharge, but you as a person know that this person probably is better off in the hospital, and it's awful. So they're trying to get him to stay, or sorry, her to stay. And so they're dealing with that. I think that's all we get from that patient in this episode. We don't get too much after that. But then we get more on our patient who is on insulin, and I'm trying to pull up his name right now because I keep forgetting his last name, because it's Dr. Mohan, who is caring for the patient. I don't even want to guess what the last name is, but it's our patient that should be on an insulin drip, who's diabetic, who needs the care, but is not able to receive it because he can't afford it. And I'm going down the list of, oh, there we go. Mr. Diaz. So Mr. Diaz is our patient who I think fainted on a construction site, and they brought him in, and it was because he was low on insulin. And they found out he's only taking half his dose of insulin because he can't afford it. And then they find out that it's going to be a lot of money to keep him in the hospital. They cut it by like 40%. It's only going to be about, I think they said $40,000 to $50,000 to keep him there, which he's like, okay, fine. Like we'll figure out a way to pay for that. But then in this episode, we see him trying to get out of the hospital through the ambulance bay. And Mohan's like, where are you going? And he's like, no, I can't do this. And she goes, why? We figured out a way that we can maybe get you to stay here on, more of a hospital dime. And he goes, yeah, but I wasn't up front. I think he was already in medical debt of like $200,000, and he hadn't disclosed that to his wife. And he goes, I haven't told her yet. And so I can't stay because we're just going to be racking up even more. And she's like, Mohan has this moment like, damn, like wow. Like, but as a physician, you're like, your job is to make sure the person is better and lives. You're not thinking of how much the hospital's making, which is such a horrible thing of this healthcare system of like these physicians, I would say for a majority of them, really do care about their patients getting better, not the money they collect or the hospital collects. And so you see that in Moen's interaction with him as she like confronts him, like stops him like dead right in front of the ambulance bay, like going, "You're not going anywhere." And he's like, "No, I am. There's not anything you can do about it. Like I'm leaving." And she goes, "Can't you just stay with us for like I can get you all the supplies you need for at least to take home for now, like, and we won't tell anyone basically, but we'll give you enough supplies to at least get you back to a baseline and healthy again." And he's like, "No, like, because it's just gonna like I gotta go support my family." And she's like, "No, like I will try to get you this stuff." And he's like, "Fine, I'll give you a little bit of time, but after that I gotta go." So she saves his life because I imagine he probably would have died if he had left because he would have passed out again and then ended right back up in the same spot, but also very close to death because of the insulin and low blood sugar. So it just it was such a powerful moment. Moen's not really had much to do until this episode. She also gets a call from her mother, who she's been getting calls from throughout the episode, talking about her childhood bedroom. So I'm very confused as to like what is going on. Like, did her parents get divorced, or like are they selling the house? Like I'm assuming something's deeper here where she doesn't want to talk to about it. So she's been avoidant of her mother's phone calls, of like she doesn't have time to really want to deal with whatever the problems are. That's what I'm guessing, is that maybe her parents are divorced or separated, or like she's upset that they're moving out of the childhood home. Like something is going on definitely. And then we also had moments of like her talking about maybe she was transferring out after this year. I don't know. We'll see what happens with Dr. Moen, but she did get a lot more parts in this episode that I thought were really good. We we then, let's see, what else do we want to talk about? I think that was it for that patient. I'm trying to fast forward here to, okay, we can talk about Dr. Orlando, or not Dr. Orlando, Dr. Orlando, Dr. Um, Abbott. So Dr. Abbott is back. It looks like he's been picking up shifts like with the police force, and they've gotten into some kind of uh, big time issue on the streets. I can't really, I don't know if we ever really see what was happening, but basically there was a lot of police force. I think it was like SWAT team was involved, and so he's on the police force as a medic, and there's a gunshot wound to one of the people on his team, so he brings them into the pit. So now we get Dr. Abbott. I think what ultimately this is for, this is brilliant writing, because I'm pretty sure the reason why they did this was because of how much of a hit Dr. Abbott was in the first season. Um, and they wanted him back earlier because if you remember, Abbott is a physician attending. He's basically Robby on the night shift, and so he probably wouldn't have shown up until like maybe 5 or 6. So he would have been around much in this season. So I think this is why they brought him in this early. And then once this happens, I'm assuming what's going to happen going forward. They're like, "We're so busy, can you help us out?" So he'll be around throughout the next thing. Um, but we get Dr. Abbott bringing in a gunshot wound from one of the police forces, one of the SWAT team members. And uh, he's so good at what he's doing. Like Dr. Abbott is methodical. He served in the military. I believe they were in Afghanistan or in the Middle East somewhere. So Abbott has served, and he's talking about his duty not only on the line here, but he's also talking about his duty and the chaos that happened in the Middle East when he served. And then we get a really, really interesting moment after he's gotten this patient stabilized enough. He has a dynamic with Al Hashimi, which is admiration and true disbelief, because Dr. Al Hashimi says, "Were you in the service?" And he said, "Yes, I served as a medic in this, area." And she goes, "Oh wow, I was in that area too, where I served as a doctor in the maternity ward." Um, so I think victims of the bombings or whatever was happening, but she was in a children's like hospital or birthing mothers hospital in a really rough area where I think there were U.S. troops in the ground, and she was dealing with children and losses of children and babies and mothers and stuff that were involved in the line of fire. And that was the moment where I'm like, okay, so now this, and there's been a lot of theories on this. So I was like, all right, now this makes sense as to why she has so much PTSD when she looks at the baby Jane Doe, baby Jane Doe, as Dana would say. But the reason why she didn't speak after she'd seen the baby being abandoned and then was looking at him. They're like, Dr. Al Hashimi, Dr. Al Hashimi, what do you want to do? And she's kind of just like, whoa. I think that she's having war flashbacks. Now, there was some discussion online, which I found interesting because, like, I guess there's a certain set of like seizures that you can have based off of trauma, which I didn't know that. But I guess you can have these like smaller. I don't. Well, I guess are they seizures? I think their seizures are like yeah. But basically, where your brain can really go through a lot of trauma and stress to trigger like a seizure, like a real small seizure, and like it can be really bad for you and unhealthy. And so there's a lot of that going around that she's having like these small. That's why she like deadpans sometimes is like she's having these, and then she has a call that she makes to a neurologist, and it's a really good point. My wife pointed this out. Like you would you she's calling she's calling a neurologist. About said urologist because of the last episode. She's calling a neurologist because something's going on with the brain, whereas a therapist or a psychologist would be more of what's going on internally in your thoughts. So she's got some brain issues, and I don't know if it's caused by these episodes that she has of PTSD. I don't know. Like I don't know what happened. So we are very unclear on what Al Hashimi has gone through, but we now know it's likely a result of PTSD and serving in the military as a medic. So both of them have that really cool moment. Dr. Abbott, which is so fitting for his character. We have a great moment. Dr. Abbott also got shot, grazed by a bullet, and he's trying to fix that up. And Dr. Moen's walking by and sees him without his shirt on, and she's kind of. It was funny. She kind of has a moment of like, "Damn, he's hot," because he's like jacked. I mean, Dr. Abbott's built and good looking guy, and he's like taking care of his bullet wound, and he's kind of like, he's hot. And Moen's like, I don't know, he's kind of hot. But she goes into the room and says, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, I'm taking care of a gunshot wound." And he's like, "I wanted to come here so I don't have to fill out a bunch of paperwork with the police." And he's like fixing up his wound. It's not too bad. It's on his back, but he can't reach it. So she comes in, takes the gloves, and tries to help. And he goes, "What are you doing?" Because she has a whole bag of stuff. And she goes, "Well, I have a patient, Mr. Garcia, Mr. Diaz, that is trying to leave, and he needs all this care for an insulin drip and everything else. Like he needs to take care of his blood sugar, and he's diabetic. So I'm got all the necessities to get him back to being healthy again." And she goes, "He's not going to be able to afford healthcare going forward, but like this will do for now. This will get him back to a baseline." And you're not really supposed to do this. Like that's a lot of money that she's just bagged up. And she goes, "We're not trying not to tell anybody that I'm doing this." But she goes, "I just don't know. I don't have anybody to pay for this stuff." And he goes, "I'll pay for it." He goes, she goes, "The hospital is not willing to pay for all this stuff." And he goes, "I'll pay for it." Such a cool moment. And it's as he's like wiping off like the blood and stuff. He's like taking care of himself, and he just nonchalantly just goes, "Yeah, I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. Like just send me the check. I'll pay for the medical supplies that you're giving him." I was like, damn, like that's going to be a lot of money for a guy he doesn't even know. And he just right away was just like, "Yeah, I'll do it." So love Jack Abbott. Like, what a great human being. What a great person. He's funny. He jokes around with Robby. He's got a good relationship with Robby. Gives Robby a little bit of ribbing. He gives Al Hashimi a little bit of ribbing. I think there's a part right when he comes in with the patient where he's talking about like basically trying to figure out who Al Hashimi is. And Al Hashimi's like, or he goes, "Is that the new attending And he's like, yeah, the one. He goes, oh, the one's that's going to replace you, huh? And Robby goes, only temporarily. But it's good. Like, I love Abbott. I think that they really wanted to bring him in earlier in the shift, so that's why they've got him working this almost like an off-duty type of role before he works his other shifts. But it brings together the cast, and now we've got basically everybody back. We're still missing, I think, the nurse with like the longer hair, who we haven't seen in this season yet. But I hear he is in this episode. Maybe he's on the night shift, but looking forward to that. I keep forgetting the guy's name. But yeah, Dr. Abbott back in the 1 p.m. shift. So I'm assuming we're going to get him for the rest of the time as they are dealing with it, an overcapacity type situation here at the hospital. Trent Norris, the CEO, makes a visit down to the hospital in this episode. And so we get our first C-suite member. So that was really interesting. And we'll talk a little bit about it. But Robby's having to deal with a lot of shit. Like, he's dealing with the Westbridge thing, and now he's going to be dealing with a new problem that we'll talk about that ends the episode on a cliffhanger. But Robby's also dealing with Langdon now. So let's get into it. Dr. Frank Langdon is finally able to apologize to Dr. Robby after they get a call about a patient coming in via helicopter who had been in a boating accident, who was underneath like the boat trying to fix something on it, and his idiot friend started it up, the motor, and it chopped up and sliced up his side with the boat motor. So that's disgusting. But they get a call that they're airlifting him in, so they go up to Robby's going up to the roof, and then sure enough, who joins him in the elevator is Langdon, and Langdon starts to go, all right, here, like, I want to talk about it. And he goes, Robby's like, I don't want to talk about it. And Langdon's like, you don't understand. Like, and he goes, no, we don't have to talk about it. They get up to the roof as the helicopter's landing. Obviously, you can't hear. Langdon goes, no, Robby, like, I'd really like to talk about it. I really would like to apologize for what I did. What I did was selfish. It wasn't right. I'm owning it. He goes, I was wrong. I will never do it again. It will never, ever, ever happen again. And Robby turns and goes, fine. You want to talk about it? He goes, you want to know something? And he goes, I don't know if I want you working here in my ER. And then Langdon's face is like, damn, like, what? Like, I mean, it was, I got chills like saying that. It was such a great moment, because then the helicopter lands and then Robby takes off. So then Langdon's right behind him. But that's like the last thing he says. And then they like stare at each other for a little bit. Like, I don't even know if I want you here at all in my life. Like, the hell out of my ER. Like, I'm thinking everybody was all aboard Langdon coming back. Robby, I think, with the C-suite was basically, and the CMO basically going, I don't want him back. And they're like, no, you're going to have him back. He's a really good doctor. And he's like, I don't want him back. So he does not accept the apology. And it was a crazy moment, because then what happens is you do start to see Langdon's confidence rattled, which Langdon's pretty confident, and it's been kind of shaky here a little bit here and there. But now that he knows that Robby doesn't even want him around, he starts to like panic and freeze up. So they go back down, and when they're dealing with this patient who's been chopped up by this boat motor, Mel's in the room with him, and Robby's like asking, all right, Mel and Langdon, what do we do in this situation? And Langdon's like, and Mel's like, you know this, like, you're supposed to do this, like, this is obvious stuff, dude. And it's so good to have her in the room because of how good their relationship is. And Langdon is getting absolutely roasted and grilled by Robby, and Robby's like, dude, like, I told you, you don't belong here. And Langdon's like, man, shit, maybe I don't belong here. And he's messing all this stuff up, like, mentally. He doesn't know the answers, and he's frozen, and he doesn't know what to do. But he's just so taken aback by what he's just been so taken aback by what's been going on. And then Robby just drops that bombshell on him of like, I don't want you around. I don't like you. And right now, and it's like, damn, what a moment, what a powerful moment. Robby, Noah Wiley plays this so well. And it's crazy because Noah's been jumping around helping out everybody in this episode, and then you've got the stark contrast of like, I'm not helping you unless you're the last person on earth that's trying to save me. Like, you are dead to me. Get the hell away from me. And it is so good. It's just, yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful story arc. I love the way that it's played out. I think that they do a really nice job of building this conflict that's obviously coming to a head. And yeah, we're getting to some really cool moments. Let's talk about a couple of other doctors before we jump back into kind of how the episode ends. But Javadi, who's been helping out with different things, is trying to basically they're trying to find where she fits. And a lot of times, what these first and second year residents are trying to figure out is what part of the medical field they want to go and practice. And so Javadi's thinking about all sorts of things like neurology and urology, all sorts of things, right? You got all sorts of options. I think her mother wanted neurology. Her dad's brought down a dermatologist for her to meet. And it's a totally different attitude. Her father is very, you do you, I'm proud of you no matter what, where her mom is so controlling and like, you're doing this and this and this. So a totally different way of handling a child and the relationships that they have. Obviously, I think the relationship between Javadi and her father is a lot better. Um, we have, because she's currently dealing with, and I think maybe this might be just a little nod of to like what maybe she's thinking of getting into. Um, More of like the family dynamics of things, but I think it's an interesting parallel that they present like this interesting parent dilemma that Javadi seems to have. She's a prodigy. She's like 21 years old almost. She's gone through med school at an age that nobody ever gets through med school. She's such a great doctor and student, and she comes in and she's a great doctor, and she's clearly headed on a path for success, and it's because of her parents. But so much of the pressure is probably from the mother, so much of the "I'm proud of you" moments from the father, and she's now also dealing with the parallel of our patient Jackson Davis, who his sister was the one. He was the one that was tased because he was hearing things, like he was hearing voices, and he kind of went crazy in the library. And the security guard, who I'm pretty sure is racist, tased him and was like, "Damn!" Like didn't know that was going to happen. But she threw a chair at him, and so this kid's been struggling with mental health, and we get Dr. Jefferson, who is our psychologist, talking to the family, and the parents are like, what's going on with our kid? And he goes, have you ever had any issues with mental health? And the mother's like, no, my family hasn't. And then pans over to the dad, and the dad's like, yeah, like my brother took his own life because he struggled with mental health. And Jada goes, what do you mean our uncle took his life? Like, I thought you said he drank himself to death. And the mother goes, well, he did technically. And then the father's like, yeah, he then killed himself. And Jada didn't know this. Jada just assumed that it was the alcohol that killed him, but it was ultimately the uncle. And they kept this secret from her. So she storms out. She goes, why do we keep secrets? Like, this isn't helping anyone. This isn't helping Jackson. And he could have gotten help before this and didn't end up in this situation because they don't really know what's going on with Jackson. And so a lot of things, very, very deep. But Javadi's the one that's been sitting in the room, and she goes, I think that this conversation needs to continue with Jada, so I'm going to go get her. So they go and they sit in like this beautiful stained glass, like there's like this bench right in front of a stained glass window, or like a really beautiful looking window. And she's talking about parents, and what a perfect person to be talking about parenting and what bad parenting can do to someone, and how psychologically this can be something that really weighs on people, and maybe some secrets. And so she knows bad family, and she knows that this is not, he's been on people not how to be bad parents, but like this was a bad parenting moment. And she goes that, the best thing that you can do in difficult times like this, talking about mental health, is actually talking about it, taking the first steps of admitting that we need to find a way to help out your brother and your family. Like, if people need to talk about it, and there's this stigma of, and I think it's also Jada goes on a walk outside, and then she comes back in, and she's like, I went on a walk to try to deal with my feelings. And Javadi's like, that's good, but also, she goes, what I've learned through mental health and dealing with patients with mental health is that when you are somebody that is struggling with mental health, the best thing you can do is opening up about it and talking about it, which, I mean, it is the case. It's always better to let people in to try to understand what's going on. And sure enough, that is what Jada agrees. And she goes, yes. So she's willing to go back in and talk with her parents and get Jackson the help that is needed. But in order to do that, they all need to kind of confront this idea of what mental health is and how do we help somebody that we love through something like this and challenging. So that's what Giavatti is up to. Trying to think of where our other docs are that are kind of, so Santos. It is funny. Santos still trying to get her notes done. She's getting a little bit better. She does have a little bit of a reconcile with Al Hashimi. Al Hashimi is, I didn't mean to put that much pressure on you. Like, yes, like not finishing your notes is not the end of the world for a second year. You're not going to get fired because of it, but like you get some serious trouble for not finishing. Basically, she's kind of letting up on her a little bit, but she's also like, I am proud of you for trying. Like, I really am happy that you're making an effort to try. And Santos is like, okay, good. I feel better. But she still can't get her notes done. And then she has a moment where she's sitting there and Jesse's taking care of the child who's the baby Jane Doe. And he's like, well, I got to go get some testing and stuff for her. Can you watch her? And she goes, I'm not watching. And then he kind of walks off. So she's stuck watching him because this baby's been crying. And that's why she wanders in there, is because it distracts her from getting her notes done because this baby's screaming. And she was like, what's wrong with her? And he goes, I changed her and fed her and we were doing different tests on her. You wouldn't be happy either. And so Jesse walks off to go get some stuff, I think some formula, and to get ready to feed her. And Santos is like, shut up. Like, she tells the baby, I think she goes, shut up at one point. Like, you need to be quiet. You're being really annoying. She's like, hey, shh, be quiet. It's such a good moment. Like, you need to shut the hell up. But she is such a great actress. But you have a little bit of a soft moment here. Like, you can tell Santos doesn't really like kids, doesn't want to get, she goes, this is why I didn't get into peds. But she does. She's like a little bit of a soft moment. And then she sings, and she's got a beautiful voice. Issa has such a beautiful voice. And so I'm glad that they were able to kind of play this in, because Santos has just been kind of running back and forth with the notes thing lately. So she hasn't been too involved since the patient that she thought was being physically abused by her father. But yeah, so she starts to really figure that out, how to be more a little more on the soft side. You don't see a whole lot of Santos being on the soft side of things. But then we get a scene with her and Giavatti in the bathroom. And there was a lot of people that were speculating about some of this stuff and like what it means. And I don't really know. I don't know what's going on. Like, I don't know if there's anything to really read into it. I'm not sure. It was really weird. Like, I think it was more of like we just don't have time to pee during our shift sometimes. I think that was it. But there were some people that were like trying to digest this, of like they were struggling with things mentally, and that's why they were like, I was like, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. But we then get our last scene of the episode in hospital. Trent Norris, our CEO Trent Norris, comes in. CEO being the big boss of the campus, and oftentimes, you see the CEO, but from the way that McKay goes, who the hell is that? And the fact that McKay's been there for some time now, a couple of years at least, and then Robby's like, well, that's the big boss, Trent Norris, the CEO, and she goes, oh. Doesn't really say that he's around too much, and he does kind of have like a rough exterior, but he's clearly got his 4th of July stuff on, so naturally the CEOs aren't going to be working on a national holiday like this, but like our leaders in the pit are, because they don't get a holiday. And so he comes in with his stuff on from his barbecue. He's got his 4th of July gear on. And he said that, hey, you want to gather your staff? And he calls Robby Rockstar. He goes, hey, Rockstar, you want to gather your staff? And he goes, can't you tell me first what's going on in the department? He goes, no, I've told your counterpart already, because they had summoned Al Hashimi to the C-suite. And he's like, oh, so I've been here way longer than her. This is like her first day, and you called her in? So you can tell Robby's pretty pissed about this, that you don't respect me enough to call her in. So, and Robby's probably one of the physicians at the C-suite's kind of like, he's an ass, but he does get things done. And we've seen that with the way he interacts with the CMO, the chief medical officer. And so you get that sense of like, he doesn't really like Robby, and Robby doesn't really like him. So Robby's like, fine, whatever. He gathers them together, and he says that the reason, Trent Norris, the CEO, goes, the reason why Westbridge has been closed and gone code black and diverting is because there's been a cyber hack. It was a disaster, and it's been a cyber attack, and they're going to, and Princess wins the gambling thing, like she guessed cyber attack, but she said all those ambulances have been diverted, and all the hospitals in those regions were getting hacked. And so now they're afraid of what their systems might do. There's a ransom that's been placed on by the person who is cyber attacking Westbridge. So Westbridge is hoping to try to avoid paying it, but if they have to pay that ransom, they might have to just to get it unlocked. But Trent Norris says that IT believes that we're still vulnerable, even though we've got some pretty good firewalls. And they're like, so we're going to have to turn off all of the electronical device, like tech, any kind of tech's got to go down. I was like, damn. So they're going full paper registrations, like all electronic health records, all patient registration, all charts, all documentations, lab radiology interfaces, email, internet, all of it down. And Robby's like, what? Like, what is going on? And Al Hashimi's like, this isn't fair to put me in this situation. He just told me it's not my fault. So they're pissed. And then they're like, Whitaker, go take a picture of the board real quick. So Whitaker's like the only one on his phone that has like the big board of like what's going on all the patient rooms. It is wild. So now everybody has to interact with these patients based off of what they remember they were doing with their patients, like what doses. So they're going to have to write all this stuff down. And then you get the final word of the episode is as Abbott is changed into like his physician stuff that he normally wears, the all black stuff. He goes, well, this is going to be fun. So Abbott clearly going to be in more episodes coming up, but ultimately that is what is left. That's on a cliffhanger of them having to deal with this cyber attack now that they're in code black. So they're over capacity. It's 4th of July weekend. There's been a cyber attack. There has been some chaos after 18 months or whatever it's been, 12 months, 10 months since the attack at Pitt Fest. Now they've got a cyber attack, and now they're going to have to try to deal with this without any of those electronics, which is so incredibly important to patient care. So we'll see how that all ends up going. That's going to back everything up. It's going to take people 2 or 3 times as long to do different things and pass information between physicians and nursing and radiology and lab. Like, it is worst case scenario. Like, if tech goes down, like if, for instance, like I work in the hospital, I think if tech goes down technically in a hospital, you pretty much have to go on code black yourself. And like, you would then also have to start to try to divert, like if they felt like you were going to, but then the other hospitals in the regions might be. So like, this is pretty much putting a stop and a halt to everything going on. But they're going to try to fight through it. They're going to try to do this, but it's going to be so very difficult. Obviously they can't stop patient care, but like, this is like dire straits for a hospital, and this could kill patients. Like, this could 100% take lives because they're not able to provide the care they need right away. So we shall see what goes on, what happens. It's going to get crazy, and we're only halfway through the season so far. Not even, yeah, almost halfway. Like, we're kind of like next episode, halfway through the episode, we'll be halfway because there's 15 seasons or episodes, and we're only on episode 7. But what a damn episode! There is so much going on. We didn't really get too much of Whitaker besides taking the picture of the thing. Mel, again, not too much from her either. We did get a call with her and her sister as she's trying to ease her sister, who's also on the spectrum. She's like, I got a tummy ache. And like, Mel's trying to be like, you don't need to come in the ER, but like, we need to, can you at least take something? You'll be okay until I get home. And she's like, well, maybe some ice cream would help. And she's like, no, ice cream would be the last thing that would help. And like, so Mel's dealing with that, but she's really been sidelined right now. So she's not had a whole lot. Whitaker didn't have a whole lot in this episode either. Garcia pretty much has gone non-existent. Should come in every once in a while with a quip or two. But there's just a lot of characters they have to try to fill in. So there's just not been a lot. It was a Dana heavy focused episode along with Robby and Langdon. But Dana, man, I mean, Catherine Lanassa, again, stole the damn episode. Her crying at the end of dealing with the sexual assault patient just like was brutal. When she gets a moment alone, because they do end up taking a break because Ileana, the patient, just is like, I've had enough. I need a break. And so they have to stop everything. And I think they would have to redo the whole exam, or like they have to just ship off what they have. So I think that It'll be more of the mental fallout after this of like what Dana will say to the patient after, and kind of the aftermath of what happened with the assault and the exam. So, but she cries at the end because she's, I think, also reflecting on the fact that she was assaulted and never really quite dealt with that. She came back to work like a couple weeks later, that she never truly got over her, and probably would never get over her traumatic experience when that patient punched her last year. Um, you could tell it definitely weighed on her. But what a episode! I mean, last last episode got ranked higher, but I thought this episode was damn good too, like right up there with it. Um, it was it sets up so much going forward. I think there's a lot of real conversations that are getting ready to happen between Al Hashimi and Robbie, Langdon and Robbie. Um, yeah, it's going to get real good. I am really interested to see what happens in the next episode. Just kind of some predictions. I mean, I think maybe McKay, they do find room for that patient. I think that patient that is dealing with all that pain that is basically in hospice care, I think she does stay. I think that McKay has a moment with the father of like she feels like she's being a burden, or that patient has a moment with her husband of like, I just feel like I'm a burden to the family now that I'm just so deathly sick, and I don't want my kids to constantly have to live with that I'm there kind of as a ghost when I'm still alive. So that I think is going to come to a head in the next episode or two, because I do think we're going to get McKay moving on from that. Javadi and uh, Jackson Davis, I think will kind of come to a head there. It looks like that's starting to wrap itself up. So those two are kind of moving out, and then we'll get some more patients, I think, introduced that they'll be dealing with. Obviously, the cyber attack is going to be a heavy focus of the next episode. I think we'll lose somebody due to this, or there's going to be a lot of anger that happens or conflict because of this. Maybe some of the AI stuff that, and Al Hashimi was very reliant, I think, on technology. Robbie less so. I think there's going to be falling out because they told her, not Robbie, the C-suite. So all of that's going to come to an ugly end. Dana dealing with what appears to still be a lot of trauma. I think also Langdon dealing with a lot of trauma still. Javadi dealing. Oh, we did get some mention of Mel. Sorry, of the deposition, because she talks to Robbie and she's like, "I'm very nervous about it." And she goes, "He's like, you don't have to be nervous. You're the best attending I've ever seen come, or not attending. You're the best resident I've ever seen come through. One of the best doctors I've ever seen come through this joint." So she gets a lot of praise in this episode from different people, and I think Mel's deposition is going to finally start to come up at some point soon, because it's been mentioned multiple times, and it's 1 o'clock, so I think we're getting to a good point to have a deposition at least, and maybe it's the next episode because Mel's been kind of sidelined lately, and I think they'll jump back in with her. But I think that's pretty much where we are with everybody. We didn't really get too much else as far as building other people up. I mean, Donnie's still talking a little bit about his kid, but the nurses kind of took a back step, based off of the last episode that we had when it was very nurse heavy. The nurses weren't really as involved this time around, so interested to see if there's any more development with them. But great episode. I really enjoyed it. I cannot wait till next week, which will be season 2, episode 8, titled 2 p.m. And again, that will air on February 25th. Thanks for watching. This has been a lot of fun. We've had a lot of good interaction here, watching the pit. A lot of good views, a lot of good interaction. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this episode does. And let me know in the comments. What are you guys thinking of the pit so far? Is season 2 capturing the same magic season 1 was? I definitely think it is. I'm interested to see where we're headed. We're about halfway through the season, so a lot more to cover in the pit, and these just keep getting better and better, in my opinion. The characters keep getting more and more interesting, patients as well. So I'm really excited about that. And Dr. Abbott's back, baby. We're really excited about that. So looking forward to it. I cannot wait to talk about the next episode. You can find us over on YouTube at the Screen Society Podcast. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts at the Screen Society Podcast. And then on socials as well, the Screen Society Podcast. We have different usernames. I'll try to drop those into the show notes. But if you do go over to any of the social pages and type in the Screen Society Podcast, we should pop up. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We will see you next time when we talk about season 2, episode 8 of The Pit.